Good morning, 11 Bravo 392. Today in this video, we're going to take off this entire bumper and we're going to do some upgrades to all this stuff right here is going in. We're going to have Colorwerkz sent me out halo rings, a little LED flow series strip. These are flow series rings, and then we're also going to do the DRL boards as well. We have everything here that they've sent us. We've got our resealable rubber, and all this is going to go inside the charger. To start off, I know I'm going to need more, but right now I'm definitely have my drill, got my pry tool, and I've got some zip ties because I'm definitely going to need that probably. So if this video turns out to be entirely too long, which I expect it to be, we're going to be breaking this up into a different part series. The first part will probably be broken down on how to take off your bumper, and let's get into that part first. So all these little rivets right here, these all need to come out. I'm going to use a pry tool.
So for the sake of time, I'm going to fast forward, and you're going to go ahead and just pop out all the rivets. And then once you do that, turn the car on and rotate the wheel all the way right, since I started on the left tire, the driver's side tire. I just felt it was necessary to start there, and so what I did is I got down and popped out about 5 or 6 plastic rivets. So here's a better look. You just want to get about 3 or 4 of these plastic rivets taken off. The 3 at the corner there, 1 more up at the top, and then there should be 1 that's kind of centered in the middle of your wheel well, directly above the tire. You want to get all those plastic rivets off so you can get access to the 2 screws that are actually holding your bumper together. And so for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and fast forward this up a little bit. But you basically take your pry tool right behind them and they pop right out. So I apologize on the video again, but there's 2 screws up here on that seam from where your bumper meets the rest of your car. I believe it's like an 8mm socket. You can just stick your hand up in there, loosen them up. Once you get them loose, they're pretty easy to come out. It's a tight squeeze, but give it your best. Okay, I'm going to fast forward here. You want to go down. There's about 8 of these 9/32 bolts that you want to get. Again, it's a 9/32 bolt. And then last but not least, you want to go ahead and get the last 2 screws that are actually holding your bumper together to the rest of the car. It's real simple. Just get your socket in there, loosen those out, and save them.
Quick recap. Taking off all these here. Here. Taking off the 2 bolts here. I've gone underneath, all along there, and then the 2 bolts on the side. So this whole bumper should come right off now.
Okay, I specifically did not want to fast forward this part because I want you to see how easy it is to take off the bumper if you just take your time and do a little bit of wiggling. It's fairly simple. When you get all the bolts off and all the correct pieces off, and you've saved your bolts into your little bolt bucket, just a little bit of, if you're by yourself, just a little bit of wiggling, you can get the bumper off. You want to be careful not to do it too fast, but just pry it a little bit and wiggle here and there. Don't forget to unplug your side markers and your fog lights for those of you who have fog lights. Once you've done that, the whole thing comes right off, easy peasy. So once you got it to this point, you just give it a firm tug, and then it'll come and it'll set right off of there. Don't forget to unplug your side markers. It's a small little plug, and it just pops right off. So once you've gotten the bumper off and set it aside, take off these 4 bolts that I'm pointing to. It's a, I believe, T20 star wrench. Very easily to come off. Once you've taken them off, throw the bolts in your bucket and the housing comes directly off. Unplug it and you're done. So there it is, you've got them off. Now you want to make sure you take off the small plastic spacers that are attached to your headlights. Also want to make a note too, once you've taken off this spacer that's connected to your headlights, now would be a good time to go ahead and clean any excess residue, soil, dirt, soap, wax that may be built up on your headlights. You want to get them nice and clean before you start baking them open, so nothing gets actually baked onto the plastic housing or any places that you don't want it. It's always a good idea to go ahead and give it a clean before you stick anything into the oven. Alright, so at this point I had the headlight in the oven at 250 degrees for 6 minutes. I made sure I put it on a cutting board, a wooden cutting board. That way it doesn't get any melting plastic. A small little wooden cutting board will work. Just make sure you take it out of the oven. Don't leave it in there so it doesn't get too hot. Get your flathead screwdriver, and you want to start going carefully along the edges, prying it open. So for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and fast forward again. This is a little bit tedious. You want to take your flathead screwdriver and you want to slowly kind of skim the edges. Don't jag it in there like I did. Although you can correct it with a heat gun and mold it back into shape. But the best way to do it is to take a flathead screwdriver, go at a 45-degree angle to the housing and also to the seam, and run it along there until you've got a pretty good grip and you can pull it apart. It does take some time. You might have to rebake it, but once you've done it and you got a good opening, you'll be able to pry it apart pretty well. It does take a little bit of time, so be patient with it, please. Okay, sorry, my GoPro died when I was actually trying to get it open, but once you actually get it open, go ahead and remove the 4 screws to get the front plate off. I believe it's a T10 star wrench. It's pretty simple to take off, but just go ahead and get your long screwdriver or drill and stick it right in there, and you can get out these 4 screws. Pretty simple. So this is what it looks like when you've taken off all the screws and you're ready to go ahead and start taking off the DRL boards. Alright, before we start taking off the DRL boards, what I like to do, and a good tip that I got from Tony over at Colorwerkz LED, was to go ahead and start labeling all your components that you're going to put in. So right here I got my 3 DRL boards that I want to put in, and my halo that I want to put in. And what I did is I just took some blue painter's tape and went to the connector, ripped off like 1-inch piece, and I kind of just went right around the housing for where the connector goes, and I just made a little mark. So if I had 2 LEDs, I put the number 2. If I had 1 LED, I put the number 1, so I knew exactly where it plugs into what once I've already put it all together. I didn't have to worry about remembering where the cables went. So good tip from Tony. Another plus for Colorwerkz for that one. I appreciate the support. And then I put for the halo, I obviously put just like a little H. So that was the best way to do that.
Okay. So, where did I leave off? Yesterday, I did opened the other headlight. Didn't take as much time as the other one did, because I have a little more experience after the first one. So it still took me about 2 hours, just because you have to bake it for 6 minutes, pull it out, try and play with it a little bit, bake it for 6 minutes, pull it out, play with it for a little bit. And the most difficult part is that you're going back and forth. And as you can see, it's still a little, I boogered it up a little bit here, but this will melt with a heat gun and I can mold it back. It does snap back in there. I've already put it back down, and it fits in there pretty nice. So this is what it, this is what it looks like when it comes off. I've already went through and I've cleaned up a good amount of all the rubber that's in there. So it looks kind of like this light gray kind of color. inside there. I'm not too worried about it. This corner here is what you want, that's nice and molded properly, so you could seat the cover back in there well. So that's good. This stuff here I'm not too worried about, because of the clamps. When we put the clamp with the cover back on, we'll clamp it, and the sealant will pull that tight a little bit too. So it's a little boogered up. I'm not too worried about it. I was freaking out on the first one, but realizing after putting the heat gun over this plastic housing will melt, and you can mold it back into shape pretty easily. So I cleaned this all up. I have to go here, and I'll show you what it's like. You just kind of pull a lot of this stuff off. Will come right off. If it doesn't, you can get a flathead screwdriver, you know, just pull it right off. It's kind of just, it's annoying, and it takes a lot of time, but you can get it off. You want to clean off all this stuff here. That's what it looks like. It's just like a kind of like a softer plastic, or a thicker rubber. So you want to make sure you clean all this stuff off, which I'll do. I won't bore you with that, but that's what it kind of looks like on the inside when you take it off. We'll set that aside. This over here, we want to get this housing out, and it's again these 4 screws here, here. SMD 1s and an SMD 2. 1 LED, 2 LED. Very easy to determine which is which. So we're going to set those there. We're going to take these off first. Going in with the T15. Unscrewing them and setting them aside. Now, when you're doing these, remember this one here, the one in the center, this one has an actual ring on it. So make sure that's the one that goes back in the center. Don't put the one on the side. I think I made a mistake on the other headlight. If you make a mistake, it's not that big a deal. It still holds it pretty well. But these ones don't fit this hole as nicely. It'll slide up and down in there. So just remember, if you have this one that has like a little bit of a ring on it, I'll show you the comparison. It's got like a built-in washer on it. Okay, this is the one that goes on the middle hole. The smaller ones are on the sides. Don't forget. Pull off the spacer tab, set that aside, and I like to use a razor blade, but I don't have one on me. I'll have to grab one real quick. Oh no, yeah, I do have it right here. I like to use my blade. I gently get underneath it, and then I just pop it. Pops right off. Super easy. Flip it over. It's like a sticky felt paper on the back. Just peel it back gently. Don't go crazy with it, because it can rip. You know, gently peel back. It's a little play in it. Peel it back, and the sticky side leave up, because you're going to reuse that. Okay, this is the old DRL. Push down on the tab, pull it apart. That's simple. That's simple. I'm going to put that with the other one. So we're going to grab one SMD. One SMD, nice and neat, clean surface, good to go. pull this a little bit, get the kinks out, line it up. Now the old wire you don't need, because the whole wiring harness for that you're not even using. So you just want to take that, tuck it down in there, and don't even worry about it. If you're OCD about it and you want to tape it to the side of the housing so it doesn't move around, that's a good idea. I'm going to go without it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to grab the felt that I had left over from the old one, from the stock OEM. Just going to lay it right on there in place. Pull a little bit and then lay it down through the middle and just work out the bubbles towards the edges. Super easy to do. There's a few other tutorials like this on YouTube how to do it. I think there's a couple other companies that do this, but I didn't see too many for Colorwerkz. So I think this might be the first how-to. I'm not sure, but let's see. Yeah, circle goes this way. So you want the round little horns here up at the top to around the LED. Okay, and then remember what I said. You take the smaller ones, not the one with the lip on it. The one the lip goes in the middle. So you take the other ones, put it in there, give it a little finger tight, and the other one, take it down in there. Okay. Drill or screwdriver. Tighten it down. That's simple.
Alright, so you're just going to want to go and repeat the process for the rest of these. It's pretty simple. Just pull them up, take the old DRL out, put the new DRL in, screw it down, and making sure you have a clean surface before you put the felt piece of paper back on, so you have good contact with the metal, and then screwing everything back in place. It's very simple. Once you've got that, then you're good to go.
Okay, so we're ready to lay this halo down. So you just peel back your backing off your 3M tape, set that aside, and remember, I want to do this, the cabling, the wires, I want to go up through this channel here. So I'm going to go ahead and set that through there, kind of make sure that those wires stay tight there. I'm going to start pushing this inward. And it's a tight fit at first.
Now, I think it was a nice fit. I didn't have too much problem with it, but some say you can take a tiny little drill bit and drill a hole through the actual halo and then use some like picture hanging wire and strap it down, but I went with that. So I connected everything up to make sure it was working. I had my wiring harness already set up, but I had to make a few adjustments. I went through and cleaned up some of the wires and made sure everything was good to go. If you want to use this same wiring setup, feel free. So here I've already gone through and I've attached the DRL drivers, the DC converter, and right here on the bar is where I'm setting up the Bluetooth remote for the Flow series and their drivers. This crossbeam seemed like the logical place to put it. So that's where your 4-to-1 splitter goes in. If you have any troubles with the actual flow or the chart diagram for how this is put together, I would highly suggest giving Tony a call over at Colorwerkz. He'll walk you through everything as he did me. I think that's one little spot where I think Colorwerkz could probably work on, is having a better installation diagram with their chart that comes with all their product. If it was a little more detailed, I think most users would be able to walk through it, and they'd probably stop bugging Tony on the phone. But he was a great guy, and he walked me through it, and it wasn't that hard. But I cleaned it up with some zip ties, and it came out pretty nice. So there's the connecting to the ground is what you need to do, and it needs to be an unpainted surface. So when you're hooking up the drivers, make sure you pick the bolt that's right next to the fuse box, and there's another bolt on the other side, on the driver's side, that's pretty visible. When you do that, make sure you get a good connection, and then wrap off your yellow wire. Obviously black is your ground. I stripped back a little bit of the wire covering so I can get a better connection, and it worked out pretty good. However, I didn't feel the need to hook up for the turn signal because I didn't want to use it for turn signal, although that's your option. If that's what you want to do, go for it. Either way, I just kind of taped it off and parted it back from the actual wire itself, leaving the ground available to hook up. And I didn't want to bore you with running that all the way through, so I'm going to fast forward. But if you have any problems, just hit me up on Instagram, and I'll hit you back really quick on how the flow diagram and how I hooked everything up. So for this part, I'm going to go ahead and start baking the headlights back together. I got my Morimoto rubber butyl. I've heated it up in the oven at 250 degrees for like 2 minutes, and it got kind of gooey, which it worked out perfect. But it's not too bad. So what I did is I just kind of pulled it a little bit and molded it flat. I went through and pulled out enough that I want to lay out along the rim or the housing to the headlight. Now once I had enough of the butyl pulled apart, I just kind of went through and tucked it in that seam pretty well. Using my fingers, I kind of just squished it down in there. It's still a little warm, so it's easily manipulable. I went through along the housing and kind of tucked it down in there until I got all the way around. I got kind of lucky on the length, but it worked out, and I tucked it in there, and I think I had enough on the first go around that I didn't have to add any butyl if necessary. So I've got it all in there. I'm gonna go ahead and set my oven again for 250 degrees. Set my timer for 10 minutes. Make sure I have my wood plank in there so it won't burn anything off. And take the whole headlight housing and set it in there for 10 minutes to get it nice and warm. So while I'm waiting, I made sure I got all my clips, my spring clips, and my quick grips ready to go. I've got a surface to work with. I got a flathead screwdriver so I can manipulate the rubber when it comes out. So it just came out the oven. I'm going to get my flathead screwdriver. I'm going to stick it down in the rubber while it's a little hot. And then I'm just going to gently press along the edge, pushing that rubber down in there to make sure that the seal is going to set properly and there won't be any air bubbles in there when I go to put the headlight cover back on. Okay, once you pull it out of the oven for 10 minutes, you want to go ahead and take your headlight cover and place it back on there and seat it down in there pretty good and start using the spring clips to get it seated. You want to go towards the edge to make sure you get a nice seal. I went and let those headlights sit overnight. It was a little hot and moisture out in the garage, so it took a little longer than I wanted for it to dry. I got the other headlight housing. I went and zip tied the pigtails for the connections, and I was ready to lay down the next piece of rubber. So before I did that, I wanted to make sure that I cleaned it all up. I used a little mean green from Rev Auto, It's real nice and it cleans up everything pretty well. So once you've connected everything up, make sure it works. Go ahead and plug everything back in. Make sure the headlights work. Break out the app. Once you've tested it, you're good to go. Plug in your headlights. Screw them back in. Grab your app. Make sure your car is on. Make sure everything works before you start putting the bumper back on. Once you make sure that everything works, get your pieces, make sure they're all together. Put your bumper back on the same manner that you took it off, and you're done. And so there it is, folks. Installed, tested at night. Flow Series halos with an LED strip that I added on later for the hood scoop. But you know, the apps for these things are really nice. They came out really good. Overall, this entire project, on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being the easiest and 10 being the hardest, I would give this project a 6. And that 6 is being pretty lenient, because opening the headlights was a little difficult, but overall everything else was very simple. If you can put in a cold air intake, you can do this job. If you can change your brakes, you can definitely do this job. It's not that hard. You just have to be a little patient with it, and overall I think you can get it done. So shout out again to Colorwerkz, my sponsor, for hooking it up this time. Terrific product. Work a little bit better on getting some pamphlets out with install guides that are a little bit more detailed. But other than that, thanks to Tony for giving me all the support, and shout out to anybody else who supported me during this project. Thank you. Again, follow me on Instagram, 11Bravo392, signing off. Peace.